Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. We are live here tonight on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, and I think on Instagram, not quite sure. But we are live and we are moving forward with our books. Now, as you can see, I'm nice and cozy because New York is really cold right now. And so I'm cozied up with you guys tonight. I got my water. I got all my stuff ready, and you guys can get yourselves ready too. And I'll just do a quick little intro while you're getting yourselves all prepared. So this series that we are doing, we are now on book number 3 of the Allan Kardec books. The first 2 books are on my YouTube, The Magical Solution, and the first book is the Spirits book. The second book is the Mediums book. And now you and I are moving forward with the Gospel according to Spiritism. So up to this point, we are on chapter 5 now. No, 6 now. But up to this point in the book, the whole idea of the gospel is to, number one, sort of tackle those big fundamental questions, good and evil, and spirits of suicide, and baby spirits and all that stuff, kind of tackling those big questions while also sort of giving the spiritists interpretation of sort of certain Christian gospels, and then on top of that, getting messages from the spirits themselves about those particular subjects too. And a lot of the spirits that they end up channeling are saints of the Catholic Christian religion. So just remember that when this book was written, Catholicism, Christianity, and of course spiritualism, which was the movement of Christian intellectualism, really were a big deal around this time when it was written. So that's really the only frame of reference they're utilizing here. So just kind of keep that in mind as we move forward. So chapter 6, the title of chapter 6. Now, mind you, what we're about to read is going to be, the word Jesus is going to come up a lot, but we're not talking about Jesus, if that makes sense. Instead, we're sort of building up sort of this mythology, if you will, because remember, we're talking about Spiritism. So we're sort of building up this mythology, if you will, that sort of allows the prophet lineage to continue, if you will. So you have your Abrahams, your Noahs, your John the Baptists, your Jesuses, your Muhammads, kind of going down the line of prophets. And Spiritism kind of wants to throw their hat in the bag here, and this idea of the spirit of truth. This is sort of where we start to see the building up to the spirit of truth, which has been the spirit that Allan Kardec and the authors and the mediums of this time have been trying to channel and work with. So the majority of the book is written with the dictation of the spirit of truth. So let's get into chapter 6. The title of this chapter is called The Consoling Christ. The subcategories are the easy yoke, the promised consoler, and then finally the Spirit's teachings, the coming of the Spirit of truth. Okay, so let's get into it. The easy yoke. Quotation from Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30. Come unto me, all you who suffer and who are overburdened, and I will comfort you. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me that I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So we get into sort of like another quote, but it's a little bit interpreted here. So we see here that all types of suffering, misery, disappointment, physical pain, loss of loved ones, they find their consolation in faith and in the future and trust in God's justice, which Christ came to teach humankind. On the other hand, upon those who expect nothing after this life, or who simply doubt, afflictions bear down with all their weight, and no hope comes to soften their bitterness. This is what led Jesus to say, "Come unto me, all you who are weary, and I will comfort you." Nevertheless, Jesus places one condition on the assistance and happiness he promises to the afflicted, and that condition is found in the law that he teaches. His yoke is the observance of the law. But this yoke is easy and the law is gentle, since it imposes love and charity as a duty. The promised counselor. A quote from John 14, verses 15 through 17, and verse 26. It says, "If you love me, keep my commandments, and I will pray to my Father, and he will send you another consoler, so that he may remain with you forever. The Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. But as for you, you will know him, because he will remain with you and will be among you. But the Consoler, who is the Holy Spirit, from my Father will send in my name, will teach you all things, and will enable you to remember everything that I have said to you." So here in this little section, Jesus promises another consoler. He promises the Spirit of truth, whom the world does not know because it is not mature enough to understand him, and whom the Father will send to teach all things and bring to remembrance what Christ had said. Therefore, if the Spirit of truth must come later to teach all things, it is because Christ has not said everything. If the Spirit comes to bring to remembrance what Christ has said, it is because it has been forgotten or poorly understood. So Spiritism has come at the stated time to sort of fulfill Christ's promise, right? So this is what I'm talking about in terms of them sort of setting up this next prophet, this next teacher, if you will, and it's supposed to come through, spiritism, right? So Spiritism has come at the stated time to fulfill Christ's promise. The Spirit of truth presides over its establishment. It calls humans to observe the law and teaches all things by enabling them to understand what Christ said only in parables. Christ stated, "Let those who have ears to hear," and Spiritism has come to open eyes and ears because it speaks without figures or allegories. If it lifts the veil intentionally left over certain mysteries. It has come finally to bring supreme consolation to the disheartened of the earth and all those who suffer, attributing a just cause and useful purpose to all pain. Christ said, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be comforted." But how can we bless suffering if we do not know why we suffer? So, Spiritism shows that the cause lies in previous existences and in the destiny of the earth where humans expiate their past. It shows them the purpose of their sufferings as being salutary, as being solitary crisis. That doesn't make any sense, but we will revisit it. A solitary crisis which lead to healing and which are purification that ensures happiness in future existences. So humans understand that they deserve to suffer and they find suffering to be just. They know that this suffering aids their progress and they accept it without complaining, just as workers accept the work without ensure their wages. Spiritism provides them an unshakable faith in the future, and bitter doubt no longer falls upon their soul. It enables them to see things from a higher point of view, and the importance of earthly vicissitudes is lost, and the vast and splendid horizon that Spiritism contemplates and the perspective of happiness that awaits them gives them the patience and the resignation and the courage needed to follow their pathway to the end. So thus, Spiritism accomplishes what Jesus said about the promised consoler. The knowledge of things that enables humans to know where they come from, where they are going, and why they are here on earth. It is the call to the true principles of God's law and consolation through faith and hope. So now we get into the spirit's teaching, right? So remember, the spirit is something that's being channeled in by a medium to interpret what was just said, and it's kind of like this idea that Jesus and the Bible and a lot of these texts, it already predicted that the spirit of truth is here, and that Spiritism is supposed to be sort of that gateway to show people that spirits exist after life, which is supposed to give them hope and unshakable faith because it's quote unquote evidence. And then from there, people will then have patience and they will want to sort of live fully and give to each other to sort of release themselves of the chains and sufferings that are here, so that when it's time to pass over, that elevation process is a much more smoother process for them, and much more. I mean, this goes deep, but that's kind of like the gist of what we're getting at here. And so the spirits are going to come in and they're going to say, and this is coming from quote unquote the spirit of truth that we've been talking about this whole time, right? It says, I have come. As I once came amongst the wayward children of Israel to bring the truth and dissipate the darkness, listen to me. Spiritism, as my word of old, must remind disbelievers that above them reigns the immutable truth, the good God, the great God, who makes the plant germinate and raises the tides. I have revealed the divine doctrine, and like a reaper, I have gathered into sheaves the good scattered amid humankind, and have said, come unto me, all you who suffer. However, ungrateful men and women have strayed from the straight and broad way that leads to the kingdom of my Father, and have become lost on their bitter path of impiety. My Father does not want to annihilate the human race. He wants you, through the help you give one another, both the living and the dead, that is, dead according to the flesh, since death does not exist, to succor one another, and for the voice of the prophets and apostles no longer to be heard, but instead the voice of those who have departed from the earth, proclaiming to you, pray and believe, for death is resurrection and life is the chosen trial during which your cultivated virtues must grow and develop like the cedar tree. O frail humans, who are aware of the darkness of your minds, do not stray from the beacon that divine clemency has placed in your hands to light your way and lead you as lost children back to the bosom of your Father. I am too moved with compassion for your miseries, your great frailty, not to extend a sure hand to those wayward unfortunates who, seeing heaven, fall into the abyss of error. Believe, love, and meditate upon the things that are being revealed to you. Do not mix tares with the good seed, utopias with the truth. O Spiritists, love one another. This is the first teaching. Educate yourselves. This is the second teaching. All truths are found in quote unquote Christianity. So here we go, right? And the errors that have become rooted with it are of human origin. And here, beyond the grave, which you believed was nothingness, voices cry out to you, brothers and sisters, nothing perishes. Jesus Christ is the victor over evil. Be victors over impiety. And that was from the Spirit of Truth in Paris in 1860. Okay, so you see sort of where this is going. And again, this is why I tend to stop at the medium's book. I usually like to just read the spirit's book and the medium's book, and I like to just stop. Because as we go further into the spiritist doctrines, it becomes more and more dogmatic and religious kind of Tony. And it starts with the gospel according to Spiritism. But you don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater, because even in these books, there are wonderful nuggets of wisdom, and there are still wonderful truths that we as humans should live by. Because I mean, like, who wouldn't want to? You know what I mean? They're definitely just things that make you a better human being, you know? So it's like, why not? But the verbiage does get a little, it gets a little triggery for some of us who have dealt with religious trauma, right? It gets a little triggery. So let me get to this part. So now there's a second quote from the Spirit of Truth. Let's see what he says. I have come to teach and console the disinherited poor. I have come to tell them to raise their resignation to the level of their trials. To weep for sorrow was sacred in the Garden of Olives, but also to hope for consoling angels will come to wipe away their tears. Workers, trace out your path. The next day, restart the trying journey of the day before. The labor of your hands supplies earthly bread for your bodies, but your souls are not forgotten. I, the divine gardener, cultivate them in the silence of your thoughts. When the hour for your repose sounds, when the thread of your life slips through your fingers, and when your eyes are closed to the light, you will sense my precious seed emerge and germinate within you. Nothing is lost in the kingdom of our Father, and your sweet and miseries form a treasure that will make you wealthy in the higher realms, where light replaces darkness, and where the most unclothed among you will perhaps be the most repleasant. Truly I say to you, those who bear their burdens and help their brothers and sisters are my beloved. Instruct yourselves in the precious doctrine that dissipates the error of rebelliousness and teaches you the sublime purpose of the human trial. Just as the wind sweeps the dust away, may the breeze of the spirits dissipate your jealousy toward the wealthy of the world, who are often the most miserable because their trials are more perilous than yours. I am with you, and my apostle teaches you. Drink from the living fount of love and prepare yourselves, O captives of life, to someday freely and joyfully throw yourselves into the bosom of the one who created you weak so that you could become perfect, and whose wills for you yourselves to knead your pliable clay so that you may be the artisans of your immortality. From the Spirit of Truth, in Paris of 1861. Here's another quote, another teaching of the Spirit of Truth. I am the great doctor of souls, and I have come to bring you the medicine that shall heal them. The frail, the suffering, and the infirm are my blessed children, and I have come to save them. Therefore, come to me, you who suffer and who are overburdened, and you will be soothed and consoled. Do not look elsewhere for strength and consolation, for the world is unable to provide them. God makes a supreme appeal to your hearts through Spiritism. Listen to it. May impiety, deceit, error, and disbelief be uprooted from your aching souls. They are the monsters that suck your purest blood, and submissive to your Creator, may you practice his divine law. Love and pray. Be docile before the spirits of the Lord. Invoke him from the depths of your heart, and then he will send you his beloved Son to teach you and say these good words. I am here. I have come to you because you have called to me. The Spirit of Truth in Bordeaux in 1861. And now the last quote, the last little nugget of truth from this spirit. God consoles the humble and gives strength to the afflicted who ask for it. God's power covers the earth and everywhere. Beside a tear, he places a consoling balm. Devotion and self-denial are continual prayer, and they contain a profound teaching. Human wisdom resides in those two words. May all suffering spirits understand this truth instead of complaining about their pain, about the moral suffering which in this world are your lot. Take these two words as your motto: devotion and self-denial, and you will be strong. for they summarize all the duties that charity and humility impose on you. The sentiment of a duty fulfilled will provide resignation and rest for your spirit. The heart beats better, and the soul becomes serene, and the body is no longer feeble, because the body suffers all the more depending on how deeply the spirit is struck. And this is written or spoken by the Spirit of Truth in Havre in 1863. So, we've now set up the Spirit of Truth, and he is quote unquote, don't quote me here. Actually, don't quote me here. But this Spirit of Truth is being portrayed here in a way as sort of like the second coming of Christ, right? Like sort of like the next prophet. So I really, really, really need you to take this with a grain of salt. However, what he's talking about here is he's talking once again about sort of consoling those who are suffering in this world, whether you're homeless or, or poor, or, just going through trials in life. These are words of consolation. Now, why is consolation even an option when you're talking about spirit, right? When you're talking about, well, I mean, if you're omnipotent, if you're omnipresent, if you're all powerful, why is suffering even a fucking thing? Like, why do we even have to like do this, right? So again, it comes from like this perspective of you don't have to suffer. You're right. Being poor and all this stuff that's happening, like it doesn't have to be that way. You're right. But because of your choices, right? And we're not talking about individual choices. We're not saying it's your fault you're poor. No, 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 no. That's not what's being said here. What's being said, and we see this in the Spirit's book too. He talks about this in length, actually. What is being said is that the choices that are made systematically, historically, as community, as a people, have led to the point, have led to this. And now we have a system that has their claws deep in us, and that system supports and has a place for homelessness and suffering of the poor, and single parents, and children who are hungry. Like, these are options in our society because our society gave them a place to be an option due to the choices that we've made as a whole, as a system. So we're not blaming the victim here, and that's why it's important to differentiate between a consoler versus a savior. It is very clear in Spiritism that there's no one coming to save you. It's very clear. No one is coming to save you. But what is clear is that there's a doctrine that can console you during your time of suffering, because the suffering exists regardless. So unless you as a people rise up and stop all of this shit and shut it down, then you're going to have homeless, you're going to have poor, you're going to have all the things that create suffering in our world. And so the only thing religion can do at that point is provide consolation, is to provide hope, is to provide charity for those, is to give as much as we can without bringing ourselves down into that pocket as well, because there's also that aspect. You know what I mean? You can only give so much before your own roof on your back no longer exists, and you're right down there with them. So there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to think about when we talk about these things. It isn't just about, Jesus or Christianity or Spiritism setting themselves up as being the second coming or whatever. It's not about any of it. It's about what the spirits are trying to say. And the spirits are saying, look, you did this, not us. And this time of trial here in this world, it's meant for that. This world is meant for trial, but the trials aren't supposed to be because you are purposefully trying to fuck other people over. That's not how trials are supposed to come naturally, because the spirit needs to evolve, right? Those trials come naturally. This, asking existential questions, falling into depression, all these things that cause thinkers and people of moral standing to be tested come naturally. So when you see unnatural things such as political agendas or religious agendas or all these societal systems that are there to kind of push people down and force people to suffer, that's not natural. And so the only thing religion can offer at that point is consolation, right? So this is just something I want you guys to kind of be aware of as we move forward. So now we're on chapter 7. This chapter is entitled Blessed Are the Poor in Spirit. Okay, now the subcategories of this one are what should be understood by poor in spirit. However, whoever exalts himself shall be humbled. Mysteries hidden from the learned and the wise. And then, of course, the last part of the chapter is the Spirit's teachings, and they're going to be discussing pride and humility, the mission of the intelligent person here on earth. So they're going to kind of talk about your role here. So let's get into it. What should be understood by the poor spirit? Like, what is the poor spirit, right? So there's a quote from Matthew 5:3 that says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," right? And what is being said here is that disbelief has made fun of the maxim, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," just as it has many other things without understanding them. By poor in spirit, Jesus does not mean persons devoid of intelligence, but the humble. He said the kingdom of heaven is for them and not for the proud. Okay? Persons of knowledge and intellect, according to the world, usually have such a high opinion of themselves and their superiority, and they consider divine things as unworthy of their attention. Their gaze focused on themselves cannot lift itself up to God. This inclination to believe themselves to be above anything and everything quite often leads them to deny anything that might be above them, even the divinity itself, and which could humble them. Or if they do consent to believing in the divinity, they contest one of its most beautiful attributes, its providential action regarding matters of this world. They are persuaded that they are good enough to govern it well enough by themselves, taking their own intelligence as the standard of universal intelligence and deeming themselves capable of comprehending everything. They cannot believe in the possibility of what they do not comprehend. Once they have passed sentence, their judgment is unappealable. If they refuse to believe in the invisible world and an extra human power, it is not because it is beyond their ability, but because their pride revolts against the idea of something above which they cannot place themselves and which would make them come down from their pedestal. Thus, they have only smiles of disdain for anything that is not of the visible and tangible world. They attribute to themselves too much intelligence and knowledge to believe in the things which, according to them, are good for simple folk. And they regard those who take such things seriously as poor in spirit. Nonetheless, say what they may, like everyone else, they will have to enter that invisible world, and they now deride where their eyes will be open and they will realize their error. However, God is just and cannot put in the same category those who scorned the divine power and those who humbly submitted to the divinely established laws, nor can they be equal to each other. In stating that the kingdom of heaven is for the simple, Jesus means that no one is admitted into without simplicity of heart and humility of spirit. That ignorant persons who possess such qualities will be preferred to the learned who believe more in themselves than in God. In every instance, Jesus places humility in the category of virtues. That brings us closer to God, and pride among the vices that distance us from God. And for every obvious reason, humility is an act of submission to God, whereas pride is a revolt against God. Therefore, it was more valuable for people's happiness to be poor in spirit in the earthly sense and rich in moral qualities in the spiritual sense. The next subcategory, right? Whoever exalts himself shall be humbled. So this is a quote from Matthew 18, verses 1 through 5. At that time, the disciples approached Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus, having called to a child, set him in their midst and said to them, "Verily I say to you that if you do not convert, and if you do not become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, everyone who humbles himself and becomes small like this child will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And as I have stated, everyone who receives a child in my name receives me likewise." The next quote is from Matthew 20, verses 28 to 28. Then the mothers of the sons of Zebedee approached him with her two sons and kneeled before him, showing him that she wanted to ask him something. He said to her, "What do you want?" And she said to him, "Command that my two sons here may have a seat in your kingdom, one on your right and the other on your left." But Jesus answered her, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink from the cup that I will drink?" They said to him, "We can." And Jesus answered them, "It is true that you will drink from the cup that I will drink, but as for being seated on my right or my left, it is not for me to grant, but it will be for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." Having heard this, the other 10 disciples were filled with indignation against the two brothers. Jesus called them to himself and said to them, You know that the princes of the nations rule over them, and that the mighty treat them with authority. It shall not be the same among you. But let him who wants to become the greatest be your servant, and let him who wants to be the first among you be your slave. Just as the Son of Man has not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life for the redemption of many. And this is the last quote by Luke chapter 14, verses 1, 7 through 11. On the day of the Sabbath, Jesus entered the home of one of the principal Pharisees in order to have his meal, and those who were there were watching him. Then, observing how the guests were choosing the best places, he proposed to them this parable, saying, "Whenever you are invited to a wedding feast, do not take the best seat, for fear that among the guests there might be a person who is more distinguished than you. And so that the one who has invited you will not have to say to you, 'Give your seat to this one,' and you will not be reduced to taking the lowest seat in shame. But whenever you are invited, go and sit in the lowest seat, so that when one who has invited you comes, he will say to you, 'My friend, move up higher.' And then this will be a reason for honor before those who are at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted." Boy, do I want to say that to some of y'all here on TikTok and Instagram. I really do. I see a lot of y'all. I see a lot of y'all TikToks and posts talking about, so like, I am so wonderful, and like people all over the world love me like so much that like I just need to share this tip with you because it has worked for me because I'm amazing. Like, relax. Relax. Take several seats, right? At least you shall be humbled. Anyway, let's move on. So these maxims that we just read, right, are the consequences of the principle of humility, which Jesus incessantly presents as the essential condition for the happiness promised to the Lord's elect, and which he expressed with these words: Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So he takes a child as a model of simplicity of heart and says, the greatest in the kingdom of heaven will be the one who humbles himself and becomes small like a child. That is the one who has no pretension of superiority or infallibility. The same fundamental thought is found in this other maxim: let the one who wants to become the greatest be your servant. And this: whoever humbles himself will be exalted, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled. So Spiritism has come to sanction the theory by example, okay? By showing us that those who are great in spirit world are those who are small while on earth, and frequently quite small are those who were the greatest and most powerful while on earth. This is because upon dying, the former brought with them that which makes them truly great in heaven, and which they will never lose, their virtues, whereas the later had to leave behind that which made them great on earth and which could not be brought with them, such as wealth and titles and glory and birth. Not having anything else, they arrive in the other world bereft of everything, like a shipwreck, survivors who have lost it all, even their clothes. They retain only their pride, which makes their new position all more humiliating because they see above them a resplendent in glory those whom they used to belittle here on earth. Spiritism shows us another application of this principle in the successive incarnations, where those who were the most exalted in one existence are humbled to the least position in a following existence, if they had been dominated by pride and ambition. Therefore, do not seek the highest place while on earth, or set yourselves above others if you do not want to be obligated to go to a lower place. On the contrary, seek the humblest and most modest positions, because God will know to give you a higher place in heaven if you deserve it. And I think another sort of thing to sort of add to this too is, you know, you seek to be humble genuinely. Like, they're not asking you to play the martyr. Does that make sense? Like, you're not here to role play suffering and victimhood and this idea of being a martyr for yourself or for others. You are simply standing in a place of humble roots. That's all he's asking you to do. All right. So now we're in the next subcategory: the mysteries hidden from the learned and the wise. So now we're going to start to get a little bit more into the esoteric kind of stuff of these interpretations. Like, what was Jesus really trying to say? And that's what Spiritism is here for, to sort of interpret those parables, but in a more comprehensive way. Because again, they feel like you guys are ready, right? So let's talk about it. We start off with a quote from Matthew 11, verse 25. Then Jesus spoke these words: I render you glory, my Father, Lord of heaven and earth, for having hidden these things from the learned and the wise, and for having revealed them to the simple and the small. It might seem peculiar that Jesus renders thanks to God for having revealed such things to the simple, the poor in spirit, and for having hidden them from the learned and the wise, who would apparently be more capable of grasping them. It is because one must understand the former as being the humble who humble themselves before God and who do not believe themselves superior to everyone else, and the later as being the proud, conceited with their worldly knowledge, who believe themselves to be the wise because they deny God or treat God as an equal when they do not repudiate God outright, despite the fact that in antiquity, learned was synonymous with wise. That is why God allows them to search for the secrets of earth, whereas God reveals the secrets of heaven to the simplest and to the humble who bow down before God. The same occurs today with the great truths revealed by Spiritism. Some disbelievers are surprised that spirits put forth such little effort to convince them. This is because spirits concern themselves only with those who search for the light in good faith and with humility, rather than those who believe they possess all the light and who seem to think that God should be very happy to lead them to God by proving to them that God exists. God's power shines in the smallest matters as much as in the greatest. God does not put the light under a bushel, but scatters it abundantly far and wide. Thus, those who do not see it are blind. God does not will to open their eyes forcefully, since it pleases them to keep them shut. Their time will come, but first they must feel the anguish of darkness and acknowledge that God and not mere chance as the one who hurts their pride. In order to overcome disbelief, God employs the means most appropriate according to the individual. It is not up to the disbeliever to prescribe to God what God must do and say to God. If you want to convince me, you must choose this or that manner at such and such time, because that time is the most suitable. Disbelievers should not be surprised, therefore, if God and the spirits, as agents of the divine will, do not submit to their requirements. They should ask themselves what they would say if the least of their servants wanted to impose him or herself on them. God imposes the conditions and does not submit to others. God listens kindly to those who humbly address God and not to those who deem themselves to be greater than God. Some might ask, could God not touch them personally with manifest signs in whose presence the most hardened disbelievers would bow down? Of course. But then where would the merit be in that? And moreover, what good would it do? Do we not see individuals every day who deny the evidence and say, even if I saw it, I wouldn't believe because I know it's impossible? If they refuse to recognize the truth, it is because their spirit is not yet mature enough to grasp it, nor their heart to feel it. Pride is the veil that clouds their sight. What good would it do to present the light to a blind person? Hence, it is necessary to heal the cause of the ills first, and like a skillful doctor, God pushes their pride first. God does not abandon any lost children. God knows that the sooner or later their eyes will open, but God wants this to be of their own will when, overcome by the torments of disbelief, they throw themselves into the divine arms and, like the prodigal son, ask for divine grace. Okay, guys, so we are going to stop here. The next section of chapter 7 is the Spirit's teachings. So we're going to close off the next time we see each other with that. So they're going to have their little say on pride and humility. And then we will move on to chapter 8, which says, let me get to it. Chapter 8 is going to be entitled, Blessed are the Pure of Heart. And the subcategories are, Let the Children Come to Me, Sinning in Thought, Adultery, Rue Purity, Unclean Hands, Scandals, if your hand is a cause for scandal, cut it off. And then, of course, the Spirit's teachings, which is let the children come to me. Blessed are they whose eyes are closed. So that will be next the next class. Okay. The next Thursday. Next Thursday. That's what it is. Now, in the meantime, the last 15 minutes I dedicate to you guys, to any questions that you might have about Spiritism, psychic mediumship, Espiritismo, what we just read, Allan Kardec, anything about his codexes. The floor is yours. And if you don't have any questions, I'll give you a few minutes to get yourself situated. Then I will let you go. Okay. Beautiful. No questions. I love it because that means it's a nice, easy night. So, once again, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share, just to help, with the algorithm for people to see. Make sure you visit my website, www.themagicalsolution.com. And, a couple things that are coming up. We have this Friday, which is tomorrow, is going to be my class at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is a 2-hour class regarding the Spiritism Intensive, and we will be going through psychic development, the concepts of psychic development, doing a couple of practices, etc., etc. So there's still time to sign up for that. Just go to my website. And Sunday, we will not be having a live interview because it is New Year's. So I will start I'm sorry, not New Year's, Christmas. Christmas. So I will start the lives again in January, and January's lineup is so dope. Like, I'm so excited to be interviewing the people that are coming up in January. If you want to know before anyone else, join my newsletter. That's also on my website. I think that's it. That's all the promo I got to give. And I will see you guys next week. Love, peace, and hair grease.